Chair recognizes Chairman Alan Powell to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen of the House. You know, I want to give my thanks to a few folks. Normally, I hadn't seen a whole lot agreed with Chairman Fleming much over his career and mine over the years, but I do agree with him on this, and I compliment him on a job well done and his temperament, as well as the members of the committee for the job well done. Now, let me preface my comments with something. The legislative process, not the legislative event. That's what this is about. We come into this Capitol on the second Monday of every January to pass legislation, to fix problems that need to be fixed, to repair legislation that needs to be repaired. And yes, my good friend from the coast, wherever he disappeared to, was right. He talked a little bit about the politics of November. But I want to talk about the politics of two cycles in Georgia. In 2018, it was about, the buzzword was suppression. Oh my gosh, nothing worked right. It was about suppression. Y'all remember that? You folks that's up here talking today, remember the word suppression in the 2018 elections? 2020 is about concerns about fraud. So that made it a valid issue that we needed to deal with. And one of the things that we looked at was a system that's broke. The Georgia election system was never intended to be able to handle the volume of votes that it handled because of that age-old belief in local control. We have a state that is growing, it's diverse, it's metro versus rural, it's white, black, brown, red, very diverse state, but there's a lot of distrust, partisan distrust, philosophical distrust. And because of that, the last two election cycles in Georgia have been running full bore. So we saw this past election, or after the election, that we have a system that needs to be revamped. When I spoke about local control, 159 counties, ladies and gentlemen, and there's not that much uniformity. We saw a system because of the pandemic this year. We saw some elections boards in some counties that did things that were different than others. And that's not healthy, and that's what led to so much of the distrust, ladies and gentlemen. But I talk about this process. I have seen in 32 years or 31 years, I've seen a tremendous number of hot button issues up here. But I don't think I've ever seen one as divisive. And I mean divisive from a different reason. What is this about, folks? This is about politics. This is about a group called Fair Fight that has got more money than any other institution or any other political action group. They've raised money. The pipeline was full going into the elections. The pipeline is full now and it's still going. They put out 8 million, 10 million, whatever it was, to put out a publicity issue about voter suppression. Let me tell you, those of us that were appointed to this special committee do not think that we don't understand the rules of the game. Do not think that we don't understand about people's constitutional rights to vote, and they shan't be abridged. Because if they are, the federal courts will rule. We laid quiet and got our work done because we couldn't say certain things. We couldn't talk about it during the process out of fear that it was going to be used or misused. I tell the story about a couple of months ago that we had a Friday meeting. The committee was there, and there was a nice lady who was testifying, and she continued repeatedly to use that same word about suppression and about your picture ID, which there was no picture ID in the bill. It was about going to the numbers off of a driver's license. And I politely reminded her that that wasn't in the bill. But I also reminded her that there was no proven fraud from November. It was only in the minds of a lot of people. And there's where the gist was. Well, lo and behold, I left the Capitol at 5 o'clock. And before I could drive to Hartwell, Georgia, it was already out on the YouTube that Fairfight, Georgia, and some of those groups had taken my comments and basically had did a little editing job. They didn't say anything about proving. They said Republican lawmaker says there was no fraud. Folks, that's politics. We all know how the game's played. Every one of us in here, we stand and we know how this game is played. The press has not duly reported the facts because I continue to tell them, read the bill. I gave an interview to a TV station last week. I think 5 seconds of it showed up what they wanted it to be heard. I've called people back. And I especially call the people that leave me messages that threaten me to remind me where they know how to find my home. Because I damn well hope they do, and they don't have to look on the internet. That's how dangerous this issue has gotten, folks, that people have gotten so emotionally involved because it has been played to the hilt. This is about keeping the money flow going for one organization. It's about the 2022 elections to keep people frizzled and whipped into a frenzy. Ladies and gentlemen, this is dangerous times. When I came to this well on the last on 5/31, I said at that time, folks, there's one color, and it's red. The same color that runs through my veins, runs the same color blood runs through my friend Al Williams' veins. But it's time to take a chill pill, folks. It's time to read the bill. Don't just listen to what you're being told. Actually read the bill. I've answered questions. I want to thank a guy from Jasper County that made an attempt. He called me several times, and his name's Elliot. Nice guy. But he called to ask me, why were we trying to suppress his vote? And I said, well, tell me what you know. Have you read the bill? He said, no, I know what I've been told. And we talked about the voter ID. And when I explained to him that we're getting away from the subjective nature of a signature match that's hard to match when you got so many today that are done with digitalized signatures and all, I said, we're going to use your driver's license number to identify who you are. Is there a problem? No. He said, well, tell me about the drop boxes. And I said, well, let me give you a little history. Have you ever heard the term ballot harvesting? Well, he had never heard of that. Well, I said, well, let me explain to you. There's a difference between ballot harvesting and voter harvesting. Voter harvesting is what we call politics. Ballot harvesting is the actual process. And I said, once upon a time, in this state, and probably in most other states, even though they don't like to acknowledge the fact, that whoever the king of the hill was, or the boss man, that prior to, they used to go and tell everybody that worked for them, or those people that they felt they could control, we want you to sign this to get you an absentee. Somehow them absentees all got marked by one person. And they're all carried at one time. That's ballot harvesting, folks. That's ballot harvesting. And it's not right. Because if you believe that everybody has a right to vote, then that person has got the right to vote their ballot and not just pass it over to somebody else. But that was a jest to the drop boxes, so that drop boxes could be secured, to eliminate or to put another obstacle in the way of ballot harvesting. But I listened to some of the opposition to this bill, and all of a sudden, history is repeating itself. The very thing that the Voting Rights Act of the 60s did away with is what you like now because you want to go back to being the new boss man. Is that right? Truest statement's been said is what Brother Al Williams said. The rules of the game will apply to all. They're going to apply to all. But what we've done in this bill in front of you is we have cleaned up the workings, the mechanics of an election system. We've tried to put in every opportunity, lock it into the steel framework of the law. This is how it works. When Elliot asked me about the absentee votings, you're trying to do away with it? No. Did you realize that you could file for an application for an absentee 6 months before an election? 6 months. Folks, we've had some folks that are being investigated because they filed an application, they voted, and went back and voted later because they thought they was voting in another election. This bill is about making a system work, retooling the mechanics of an election system so that whether you're from Hart or Franklin or Fulton or DeKalb, that this system should work the same for every voter. That's what this bill is about, ladies and gentlemen. That's what it's about. But you continue to listen to the politics. You continue to listen to the PR work that's being done. And it's being done for somebody that's making a ton of money. Somebody's making a ton of money by cranking the wheel of dissension, racism, the ugly word. This ugly word, but it's being used just as much on one side, if not more today, than on any other side. This is dangerous, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely dangerous to divide not just the nation, but the state. Because a lot of the calls that I have gotten, ladies and gentlemen, aren't just from the state of Georgia. And believe them or not, I'll call them back just as quick, just to ask them one question. Have you read the bill? Show me where there's suppression. There is no suppression in this bill. Now, I doubt that the press is going to say that, even though I did see a couple of the publications in the last couple of days have dared to breach the subject. I read one this morning that said GOP suppression. Gosh, that's funny. They actually increased the number of days on the weekends. That's pretty interesting. That's pretty bold coming from a publication, ladies and gentlemen. Pretty bold coming from the Wall Street Journal article the other day. Generally, I don't care much for newspapers, but the Wall Street Journal has always been one they've always editorialized pretty fairly. But when you see an issue that's gotten so serious that they perpetrate extortion of the corporations to blindly follow, that we're going to protest your business if you don't follow behind, that's dangerous, folks, because then it leads to economic extortion. When we see a member of this legislature who is called to the carpet by clients to tell them, we're going to have to dismiss you and ask for your resignation because you're doing your job whether somebody else agrees or not. Or the senator over there who was dismissed, summarily dismissed. Is that not the same thing that y'all have talked about fighting for years about? You're perpetrating the same poison. Absolutely. What's the difference in that and what you used to say the white man did to y'all? Not a lot of difference. history repeats itself. So I would encourage you, read the bill. Read the bill. We're all brothers and sisters and citizens of the state. But because of the politics, because of the next year's election, but more important, because of that terrible thing called the political money tree, to keep it churning, that's what's creating so much dissension. To those people who might dare to hear what we're saying here today, I would encourage you to read the bill. Don't just listen to me. Don't just listen to my friend James Beverly or my friend Al Williams. Read the bill. Use part of what all this money we've spent for the educational system of Georgia to teach you to do. Read it, understand it, and make your own decisions. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Chairman